we're going to start our descent preparation.
Okay, so descent page.
Forecast.
Yeah.
We're going to enter some descent forecast winds. Enter them as PFPX gives you them. I'll give you the winds anyway, because I'll read them off to you. And you're going to enter them at 310, 200 and 100. Yep, 310 is above what you're flying at, but it's given them to us, so we'll stick them in. So you enter those numbers on the left-hand side. And
310, 200 and 100.
Correct.
Okay.
We're going to Madrid. At the top left there, you can see the transition altitude is indicated.
Yeah.
Okay, transition altitude in the Madrid FIR, I think it's 13,000 feet. I'm just about to tell you. It is. The transition altitude is 13,000 feet. The transition level is given by ATC. So let's make the transition level 140. You happy with that? Okay, so at 30,000 feet, 31,000 feet, the wind is 260 at 101 knots.
Wow.
260/101. Put that in and execute it.
Yeah.
At 200, it's 270 at 52.
Yeah.
And for those of you that are readers, you'll see that I round up the degrees and I leave the speed as it is, but I round up the degrees or round them down. It's not worth putting in the extra digits, it's just more typing. And at 10,000 feet, it's 300 at 32.
Okay.
We would now be tuning, one of us would be tuning ATIS, and we'll be finding out what the current ATIS is at Madrid, but I'll tell you what it is now. Okay, at Madrid at the moment, the pressure is 1021. You can put that in, 1021, and that's at line select 2 right. Execute that. What have we got then? The temperature is 9, it's partly cloudy, the surface wind is 0702. Visibility is 10 statute miles. Clouds are scattered at 5,000 feet. The dew point is -1. There's no reported precipitation. So that looks like quite a nice day at Madrid at the moment. So the next thing we can do is we can decide on what we're going to land on, what runway we're going to land on. And Madrid is a complicated airport, to say the least. But we already know from Matthew's brilliant flight planning that we're going to now land on runway 32 left, and we're going to use Prado 1 Delta arrival. So press the depart arrivals key.
Yep.
Press the arrival prompt for Madrid. Okay, and then I'm now looking at my charts for Madrid, and we said 32 left. And now I have my ILS for 32 left. I don't know what you do with your readers, Matt, but normally you'd be calling up charts and having a look at charts and the like at this point, and we would we'll be looking at those now, and we'll be deciding on what runway we land on. So there's 32 left, and I'm going to select the ILS Zulu for 32 left.
Yeah.
It's on the next page, ILS Zulu 32 left. The transition is going to be the Asbin transition, looking at the charts.
Yeah.
And then I'm going to go next page, and find the Prado 1 Delta, did we say arrival? Look down my flight plan, what does it say? Prado 1 Delta. Okay, I'm going to execute that. Press the legs page.
Yeah.
Press the previous page, go to the end of the legs, and we're going to work back up. So we've got the go around route information, and we've got the runway, we've got the final approach fix, and we're going to very quickly, before we do the brief, check on those details. And I've got the final approach fix, or the intercept fix at 4,000 feet, the centre fix, and then I've got Papa Delta Tango, Asbin with a hold, Sergu, and then I'm on to the star information, and then PDT 49, D121, and then Prado. Do you have the same?
Exactly.
All looks good to me. I'm just going to find my star, shuffling through my charts as I do, because there's absolutely hundreds of them in Madrid, being a wonderful place that it is. Where is it? Prado 1 Delta, there we go. It's 10 to Echo, that is. So I've got all my charts now, and I can see that that is correct. For the sake of argument, let's remove that hold, Matthew. So take Papa Delta Tango and place it onto the waypoint that says hold at has been. So you're just going to get rid of that hold and then execute that. And just make sure that you go Sergu has been Papa Delta Tango.
Yeah.
Okay. So when you're ready, we'll start the descent brief. I don't know whether you want to do it or you want me to do it.
No, go ahead.
I've been talking a lot. I've been talking a lot.
You know more than me, so it's easier if you say it.
Okay. About 100 miles from the top of the descent, you really need to start getting yourself prepared and make sure that you do all of those bits and pieces as you do. The pilot flying hands over control to the pilot monitoring, and then they do the briefing. You verify that you've loaded all of the terminal procedures and the arrivals and the instrument approaches. And for the descent, the pilot flying really should have the descent page all on his CDU. And if you leave it on the cruise page, the VNAV cruise page, it will automatically go to the descent page. Pilot monitoring should have the legs page, and if you need to select another page, select it, but they're the defaults that you should really go back to.
Okay.
Because the pilot monitoring is the man that if he's given a direct, the aircraft's given a direct, the pilot monitoring is the man that selects that direct routing, and before he executes it, he confirms with the pilot flying that all looks correct, and then it's executed.
Okay.
But obviously, because it's a single pilot operation, we have to do those things together. Okay then, the descent and setup then. The descent then. We've got the descent page up, and we can see our target speeds and our speed restrictions. For the sake of argument today, what I want you to do is where you've got the speed restriction, it should say 240 at 10,000 feet.
Yeah.
It's an ISM. The NG flies nicely at 250 knots / 10,000 feet. Readers, watchers, you can do this if you want. Try it. It works for me very nicely. Some airlines manually drive the speed to that, some airlines don't. We're going to do that at the moment for the sake of argument. Okay, we've done the descent forecast, but we're going to go and check the descent forecast prompt now. You'll see there's a thing there called ISA deviation. That's the average deviation from ISA. Oh, you've just popped up on TCAS. From ISA temperatures. Now, it isn't actually modelled inside this aircraft at the moment. And hopefully, when they push out the SP for it, we should get a properly modelled ISA deviation. You can get your ISA deviation out of your PFPX flight plan. The ISA deviation at the moment is -3, and that's an average over the entire descent. It's not the deviation at the landing altitude, it's not the deviation at the cruise altitude, it's an average of it. It's -3, so type -3 and a slash in the scratch pad, and then put that in next to 1021. Execute that. It's not modelled at the moment, I know that. All you haters out there, you're shouting at me. Hopefully it will be modelled in due course. What that does, you'll see though if you're quick, is that it actually removes the top of descent information. The aeroplane will recalculate the top of descent point, and the aim, remember, of VNAV and the FMC is to allow the aeroplane to fly at almost idle thrust in a glide for as far as it can. That's the name of the game. And by entering that, it's good practice to get used to doing it now if you can, because hopefully it will be modelled in due course. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Before people start shouting and screaming and saying it isn't modelled. Yep, we know it's not modelled, but we're still going to do it. Okay. At this point in that descent forecast page, if we needed to inform our flight management computer and the VNAV magic that it holds that we needed anti-ice during the descent, we could put the on and off altitudes. We don't need it today. It's important that you do. If you are using anti-ice in an NG, the engines idle at a higher thrust setting. Obviously with that, the descent is going to be shallower and it's going to be longer. So if you use anti-ice, you do need to do that. You can use ActiveSky to give you some calculations. The anti-ice needs to go on before you go into visible moisture, but it doesn't need to be on, you know, at the top of descent. Okay, but it needs to go on before you fly into visible moisture. And the rules of the game regarding anti-ice and flying are pretty simple in the air. The anti-ice should be on if the outside air temperature is below -10 and there is visible moisture or precipitation in the air. However, what I want you to do, Matthew, is press the progress page and go next page. Progress page, then next page.
Yeah.
Anti-ice is not used if the outside air temperature is below minus 40 degrees Celsius in the cruise. Have a look at your ISA, SAT ISA at the moment.
41.
Mine's is minus 41. Deviation's minus 3. So if we were in cloud at the moment, we would not need to use our anti-ice. However, if it then went to minus 35 and we could see that we were in visible moisture and precipitation, obviously we'd need to turn it on, wouldn't we?
Yeah.
It's pretty straightforward. How many people do you see flying along in their flight sims in blue skies with all of their anti-ice on all of the time?
Guilty as charged.
I know, we've all done it. Actually, in reality, it just makes the engines work harder and it burns more fuel, and you'd be having an interview about coffee with the boss if you did it too much. Okay, the approach. We've looked at the approach. It's fairly straightforward, but I'll give you a brief on it. We're doing the Prado 1 Delta arrival. That's Prado, Villa, Surgu, and then the initial approach fix, which is Asbin. And from there, we're going to do the ILS, Zulu, Category 1 to runway 32 left.
Yep.
Okay. Press the init ref page. And on my briefing strip on my chart, the localizer course is 1099. You should be able to see that because we've loaded it up.
Yeah.
And the course is going to be 324. So on your course selectors on your MCP, select 324 now, both sides. Three, two, four. Let me know when you've done that, mate.
Done.
Okay, and on your navigation radio on your side, tune 1099.
Yeah.
And leave that parked at the moment in standby. Final approach course we've talked about, and the glide slope at the locator, so that's the glide slope check flight, is 3,503 feet. And that is at 4.7 DME. And then we're going to descend to a decision altitude because it's a Category 1 approach. And we're going to use the Category D approach minima, which is 2,214 feet. And that's set Barrow. So guess what we have to do, Matthew? Get winding that barrow up. 2,214 feet. 2214. And everyone's going to now start saying, why aren't you setting radar altitude? We're not doing a precision Category 2 or Category 3 approach. We are doing a Category 1 approach. We will be landing the aeroplane manually, and our reference altitude is referenced to the barometric pressure setting. If we were doing a Category 2 or 3 approach, we would then use the radar altimeter as our primary means of determining our minima. We'll talk about that in due course. No doubt there'll be lots of people asking questions about it. I know in the sim world, some people just set whatever they want to set with a radar altimeter. You can do that if you want, but actually it won't give you the correct terrain clearance if you want to play the game properly. Let me know when you've done that, mate.
2214
Most importantly about 2214 is it must be set on the left-hand side. If it isn't, you will not receive minimum call-outs in the approach, even though you may be flying from the right-hand seat. If you don't set it on the left-hand side, you won't get the call-outs. So whatever you do, make sure you've done that. So I've been a good pilot. I've set it twice. 71 miles to the top of descent. We're doing very well. We're getting warmer, aren't we?
Yeah.
2214. Okay then. So we're going down to a decision height of 2214, and then from there we'll either have contact with the runway or we won't. We're looking for pappies either side. High intensity approach lighting. It's a nice day, so we should see the runway environment. Okay. If we cannot see the runway, we'll conduct a missed approach. We'll climb on the runway heading to 2.9 miles on the Barajas VOR. We'll then turn left at 185 knots or less to 288 to 5.7 at or above 3,000 feet. We'll turn left, still at or below 185 knots, and we'll pass 13.5 on the Sierra Yankee VOR at or above 4,400 feet. Okay, and then we'll turn left, maximum 220 knots onto 170 to the Golf Echo NDB to join the holding at 5,000 feet. It says do not climb above 5,000 feet. So 5,000 feet will be the altitude we'll set at a later stage during the approach for our missed approach altitude.
Roger.
So, any questions on that?
Nope.
Okay, that's all good. If we go to the airport chart then, 32 left is 3,988 metres long. It's a lovely big long runway and we're quite light. I look at my progress page, it says we're going to get in with 3.7 tonnes. I look at your wonderful flight plan that you gave us earlier, and that says we're going to land with 3.7 tonnes. PFPX is an amazing thing, isn't it? Our landing weight, PFPX has already given us. Our estimated landing weight, I make it 61.8.
Yeah.
Look at your CDU, press init ref, type 61.8. Place it into the top left, line select 1 left. Okay, we're going to use flaps 30, and you'll see that the flap 30 speed is 31.44.
Yeah.
Select that into the scratch pad and put it into the flap speed window. You should then see that the VREF of 144 is shown at the bottom of your speed tape on your PFD.
Yep.
It's a nice long runway. We're going to use auto brake 1 today because it's a nice long runway, and we'll use idle reverse because it's a nice long runway, and we're going to save the brakes, and hopefully we'll vacate the runway on Lima 7 or Lima 5, which are the 2 high-speed turn-offs onto the runway. So we'll vacate left, Lima 7 or Lima 5, and then we'll do another hard left, Alpha 10, Alpha 9, Alpha 8, Alpha 7, through gate 1, and we'll be parking at Tango 20 and Tango 21. I'll go to 21, you can go to 20.
Perfect.
Okay, pressurisation, landing altitude, 2,000 feet.
Yeah, set.
Anti-ice.
Is off, we don't need it as required.
Correct, we talked about that. Approach, brief and fuel. We've discussed the approach brief. We've got 3.7 tonnes of fuel.
Yep.
IAS and altitude bugs. We've got a decision height of 2214, Barrow.
Yeah.
And that'll be against 1021's the current QNH, so you can set that in white below the standard on your PFD now.
Yeah, already done.
And the IS bug is 144. It's flat 30, so the bug speed will be 144 plus 5, 149. Okay, that's the descent checklist. In the meantime then, if you want to put your left ADF switch to ADF, and you'll notice that your ILS information, the frequency and course, are displayed in white above in the top right hand corner of your PFD. But obviously that nav height has not identified itself yet, but we are waiting for it to identify. So make sure that you've now got the ILS set.
Yeah.
And that you should have Papa Delta Tango 11695 set on the left hand side. Papa Delta Tango is just identified for me. How do I know it's identified? It's come up as VIR2 PDT. There's also a way of doing that by using your switches and buttons that you have on your mic and source selector panel. So if you look at that now, and if you look at the buttons, the second row of buttons, you can see that on the left there's nav1 and nav2. So Matt, when PDT is idented, you should hear the Morse code to it if you press the nav2 button down. It should come across in the speaker. I'm just pressing that down now. So there's 2 ways of identifying the nav aid. You can either do it by the Morse code identifier, but because Mr. Boeing's a wonderful thing, once the aircraft's identified it, it shows up the 3-letter code for that on your navigation display. And I've just manually identified that, and that's working wonderfully. So I'm going to deselect that now, but I'm also going to now put the nav1 button down, and as the ILS comes into range, hopefully I'll be able to identify that. I've just had a drag required message. The aeroplane wants to slow down, and remember that we're landing at an altitude that's 2,000 feet above sea level, so things are going to happen and the aeroplane's going to want to slow down, and we need to get the aeroplane slowed down probably a little bit earlier than you might ordinarily expect to do, and we need to be at that platform height to intercept the ILS of 4,000 feet. And for the sake of argument now, I'm going to go ahead and set that, as I'm at about 14,000 feet. Let me know when you're going to do that, Matt, and that you're going to go and set QNH, because there's another a part of the check that we're going to need to do at that point.
Yeah,
And
well, I
just pull the
set it
bits-
now because I'm descending through it, so...
Okay, well if you set 4,000 feet, just for the sake of argument at the moment, there's no significant terrain. It's actually below MSA on our chart, but that's fine. We can see it's a clear day. If you go ahead then and set QNH 1021,
Set.
4,000 feet,
Yeah,
we're
set.
now at the approach checklist. So altimeters and instruments, well I've got 1021, I'm passing 12,800 feet for 4,000 feet, and that's 3 times.
Save it.
The approach aids are yet to be set, and what I'm now going to do is I'm going to set the standby ADI, and we've got the old steam driven instruments on your little emergency attitude and direction indicator. You can see there's a switch on the left hand side of the bottom left hand corner. It's a 3-position switch. Off is to the left, 1 click to the right is approach, 2 clicks to the right is back course. Take it back to off, and then turn it on to approach. And once the ILS is received, you'll see that the ILS indications for the localizer and the glide slope will appear like they used to in the old fashioned style as 2 bars across that window, so that if we do lose our primary flight instruments, we are at least going to have a secondary mode and means of flying down that ILS. So let's talk about flap extension then.
Okay.
In the NG, we need to have, I think it's a good idea to have flap 1 by that first outer green circle, and your readers will see that on your ND coming up shortly. And what I like to do at this point, I don't know whether you want to, Matt, is I make those 2 displays big so that I can see them nice and closely. The aircraft will slow to the flaps up speed, and there's a small decel donut on the magenta line that shows you how to do that. If you then start to deploy the flaps, the leading edge and the trailing edge devices, the flight management automation will start to reduce the speed to the next flat limit speed. However, once you start to deploy things like flaps, you really need to be taking control of that speed. So at that point, we're going to conduct what we call a speed intervene. We're still in VNAV, and what we'll do as we pass through the flaps up speed is we'll press that button, and we'll then manually set the speed bug and deploy the flaps as we go along. You clear with that?
Yeah.
Okay, my ADF, Mike Alpha's just identified as well. I'm just waiting for that to tune, and I'll just select ADF 1, and we should pick up the Morse for that. I'm picking that up now, checking my chart, dash dash dot dash. I was never very good at Morse code, even though I did learn it. So that's identified. So that we're waiting on this approach checklist then for all of our navigation aids. So we're still, the one item that we haven't completed on that is the approach aids. So we're just waiting for the ILS to identify. So I'm happy with the ADF. So I've still got my nav 1 button pressed. I'm passing through 10,000 feet. So that's my last pressurization check, and lo and behold, it's an upside down L. It looks like it's about 20 past 1. I'm going to stick my fixed landing lights on and my runway turn-off lights, and I'm going to chime the cabin once more on the way down. And remember, we're 2,000 feet above sea level, so we've got about 8,000 feet to go. It's a nice day here, isn't it?
Beautiful day.
So we've talked about the flaps, we've talked about speed intervening and taking manual control of the speed at that point and slowing the aircraft down. And the normal routine, flaps up, you select flap 1. As the flaps deploy and extend to flap 1, you then select the speed cursor to flap 1. At flap 1, with flap 1 set, you check the speed, you select flap 5s, and then you move the speed cursor back to the flap 5 position. It's fairly straightforward. And the normal flap extension sequence on an NG is flap 1, flap 5, and then gear and flap at 15, and then normally landing flap after that. And we're going for flap 30, so we're going to extend flap 1, 5, gear down flap 15, and then we're going to select flap 30. If you do a flap 40 landing, you may want to select flap 25 after 15, or even flap 30 as an intermediate. And there we are, my ILS is identified. So my approach aids are identified, and that's my approach checklist complete.
Just waiting on that, and then mine will be too.
And if you're really interested, folks, go and find repaints for this particular airline by a guy called Christian Moore, because he's actually put the before takeoff, after takeoff, descent and approach and landing checklists on the yoke checklist as they would appear in the real aeroplane, so you could actually follow that through there. Very nice repaints. Happy with the flap and gear extension sequence?
Yep.
Okay, all sorts of people will be crowing now and saying you haven't turned the engine start switches to continuous, you haven't armed the speed brake. They are all armed normally at a later sequence in the flight. The speed brake is normally armed once the gear is down. Okay, and the engine start switches on an NG, unless they're required by anti-ice, they're normally placed to continuous once you've got gear down and flap 15 and not before. Not always. If it's raining and it's foggy and you've got anti-ice on, you need to put your start switches to continuous. However, under normal conditions, those particular controls are set with gear and flap. It's getting a little bit bumpy here as well at the moment, just passing through a little bit of light chop. And I'm taking the range in, and one thing I haven't really discussed, but I don't know whether you're doing it, I expect you are, is that I'm manipulating the heading bug so that my heading in my MCP matches the course of the aircraft.
Yeah.
And that's adjusted with wind. There is a little white caret on our ND, and we fly track and magnetic heading. And you should always attempt to adjust your heading bug to match that caret. And that caret allows for drift. Different configurations, such as heading up, would involve a different methodology for setting that. What I'm going to do now, I'm on 270 degrees, is I'm going to go heading select. So I'm out of LNAV, and I'm going to select the ILS in the heading mode, and I'm now going to arm the localizer. And at this point, we'd probably be getting vectors from ATC. So my localizer is armed, and it's good practice, a normal practice, to intercept and catch the localizer before you catch the glide slope. My glide slope's actually alive, but the aeroplane is slowing down nicely. I don't know what yours looks like. Can you see a little deceleration donut there? A little green
just
circle?
a little bit further on. And we've just identified the ILS now, so that's my approach.
Good.
Checklist complete.
That's all good. The landing checklist is next. Is there anything that we haven't discussed at the moment? It all sounds and looks like it's going to plan.
Yep.
Okay. If you want to, as you'd make the turn at PDT, go speed intervene and set the flaps up speed. That's what I'm doing. Quite often when you go into MCP speed with speed intervene, you'll see that the VNAV mode goes to VNAV speed. At the moment, I'm lucky mine stayed at VNAV path. If VNAV speed is enunciated, then effectively the aeroplane is not flying the vertical path, but it's concentrating more on flying the speed. And there's my flaps up bug, so I'm going to set flaps 1. The localizer is green. I've now armed the approach, and I'm reducing my speed bug to the flaps 1 speed. So I'm now looking to intercept the ILS. The aircraft's slowing down nicely, and there's a level segment of flight. Okay, my radio altimeter's alive.
For me.
Okay, that's all good. Radio altimeter is alive. 1,000 feet to go. Let's quickly talk about stabilised approach then, while we're waiting to intercept the glide slope. Okay, stabilised approach. Your final approach speed should be less than what they call VREF plus 20. So VREF plus 20 knots is the maximum speed that you could fly in windy or gusty conditions. So it should be at least less than that, and it should be correcting to the bugged speed. Your vertical speed should be proportionate to your ground speed. It shouldn't be more than 1,000 feet a minute unless you're conducting a particularly steep approach. You should be on profile in the landing configuration, and the engine thrust should be set at an appropriate level. It's pretty straightforward. Most airlines use 1,000 feet, normally on the radar altimeter, and 1,000 feet above the runway as their stabilised approach criteria. Okay, if they're not stabilised by about 1,000 feet, then some airlines, SOPs will call for a go around. Okay. In IMC, most airlines say that by 1,000 feet above the runway, so in instrument meteorological conditions, the aeroplane should be stable. And in VMC, by a minimum of 500 feet. Visual approaches are normally at about 500 feet. And if people are conducting sidestep approaches, then that can go lower till about 300 feet. But the key to this is getting the aeroplane configured reasonably early and being stable at 1,000 feet. That's my personal cut-off. If things aren't happening nicely at that point, I'll probably be considering a go around. I don't know what you think about that.
Pretty much. I mean, I'll fly it to the point where I start to panic. And at that point, I know I'm not doing something right.
Okay, my glide slope's alive. I'm about 1 dot up. Glide slope is armed. And I'm going to take flap 5. 1 dot above the aircraft, the throttles are going to reduce. Airspeed's now below flap 1. I'm in VNAV out. The aircraft's levelled off. Glide slope is now green. And the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to set my missed approach altitude to 5,000 feet. And I'm going to keep an eye now on that speed. NGs, notoriously slippy aeroplane. On occasion, in tailwind conditions, on bumpy conditions, you may need a touch of speed brake at this point just to slow the aeroplane down. My speed is decaying nicely and I'm approaching that 4-mile green ring. Can you see those green rings now?
Yep.
Okay, I'm just over that 4-mile green ring. Gear down. Speed check flap 15.
Localizer.
Good for you. So I've now set the speed bug to flap 15. I've turned my engine start switches to continuous. And I've armed the speed brake. I'm going to say I'm clear to land, so I'm going to put all my landing lights on. So I'm now fully established. I've just gone over the ADF. Things are looking nice. I'm on speed. I'm going to select flaps 30. And I'm going to set my cursor to VREF +5. Boeing very cleverly made that speed cursor in such a shape and size that if you place the bottom line on it, at the top of the ref green letters, that will be 5 knots. So you don't have to faff around. That's 1,000 feet stable for me. So you don't have to faff around, people, worrying about looking at the MCP. It's quite easy to visually set it on 800 feet. So I'm going to go a bit quiet now, Matt. You call me when you want your landing checklist.
Well,
my landing checklist is complete.
So.
My landing checklist is complete. I'm at 700 feet. All my automatics are coming out. And while I'm flying this now, a word on automatics and auto throttles. Boeing recommend that when you take the autopilot out on the approach, you also take the auto throttle out in the NG. Now obviously, newer, more modern airplanes like 777s fly with the auto throttle engaged. However, underneath this wonderful little aeroplane with all of its beautiful primary flight displays and liquid crystal displays and indicators is a 50-year-old aeroplane. Okay, so when you turn the autopilot off and you're flying pitch, power and speed, you really should have the auto throttle off as well. I'm at minimum, continue, land. I've got 2 whites, 2 reds.
7.5 miles.
Okay, I'm coming up on 100 feet. And in the flare, I'm going to adjust the body attitude by about 2 degrees, passing through 30 feet. And at 20 feet, I'm reducing the throttles to idle. The aeroplane flies onto the tarmac. Idle reverse has been set and the auto brake is kicking and the airspeed is reducing and I'm steering the airplane down the runway using the rudder pedals.
I'm going to go gear down and flat 15. With that, ignition.
Speed brake. 60 knots. At 60 knots I'm going to reduce my reverse thrust to idle reverse. Feet are off the brakes. And I'm looking for my turn-off point now. And there it is.
Right, I am ready for the landing checklist.
Okay, landing checklist start switches.
Are continuous.
Recall.
Checked.
Speed brake.
Armed, green light.
Landing gear.
Down and 3 green.
Auto brake.
Set 1.
Flaps.
30 green light.
And landing lights.
Now on.
Okay, the runway is clear. It's yours.
Powered out. And auto throttle out.
I'm now off the runway, so I've turned off my strobes, I've turned off my transponder, and I'm steering the aeroplane using my rudder pedals. Taxi lights on, landing lights off, strobe lights off, speed brake down, and the flaps are up. If you're flying with another pilot, the indication that tells the pilot not flying to start conducting all of those after landing items is that the pilot flying, or the pilot, the captain of the aeroplane, lowers the speed brake. And you shouldn't really do anything to the aeroplane before he does that and control is handed over. So viewers can watch Matthew, and I'm going to tidy my aeroplane up, and then when
nice display threshold.
Yeah, it is, isn't it? We didn't really talk about that, but we can. We had a bit of an epic with Skype earlier on, folks. But we managed to. We managed to recover ourselves. Oh, and there you are. I can see you. Okay, after we've landed, we're not going to start the APU because Madrid, being part of Spain, is quite sensitive about their noise. And we're going to taxi onto stand and we're going to go straight onto the ground power. But as Matthew does all these bits and pieces after he's landed, we'll talk him through all of those bits and pieces. Looks like he's just landed in front of me. And that looked very nice. I'll find out when you put this on YouTube.
it wasn't as nice as you think. I floated it. For like 5 seconds. It wasn't too bad.
Okay, well that's not too bad. On a nice long runway like this, is it?
I can get away with it. I've done worse in my time.
Okay, we've all done worse. What do they say? A good landing and all that. Okay, let me know when you. Let me know when you're stowing the reverse as you. And you're going to manual braking and you're turning off, yeah. And we'll go through your flow with you.
Vacating now on the left.
Okay, speed brake down.
Yeah.
Select flaps up.
Yeah.
Landing lights off, taxi light on. Or taxi light on, landing lights off.
Yeah.
Okay, position and strobes, flick them down to steady.
Yeah.
Transponder, turn that off. Auto brake off, press the system display on your DU, check that you've got sufficient brake pressure, hydraulic pressure, and then put it onto the engine display and leave it there.
Right, hang on, I'm still on transponder, carry on from there.
Okay, transponder, that's off.
Yeah.
Auto brake, turn that off.
Yeah.
Your lower display onto system momentarily, check your hydraulic and brake pressure, check that you've got sufficient, and then put it onto the engine page and leave it there. You can turn your flight directors off, set your airspeed window to 0. Normally if we were turning around you'd probably set your altitude to the transition altitude plus 100 feet, so 13.1, and you can leave the heading bug where it is for now. Don't start the APU, and you can turn the pitot heat off when you get the chance to look at the overhead.
Yep.
We're going to taxi onto stand, and there's going to be a little man there with a ground power unit. So make sure you get one of your CDUs onto the ground connections part of it so that you can transition to that.
Yep.
Rules of thumb for APU with a lot of airlines are if the outside air temperature is below -5 or above +25, they put the APU on. However, if they can get away with not using it and not burning fuel, a lot of them, if the temperature's above and below those parameters, will try and save fuel by not using the APU. Okay, I'll just have a look outside of my window now. Turning on to start
now.
Okay then, so you can make sure your pitot heat's off. And you can probably dispense with your turn-offs now, and as you turn on the stand you can turn your taxi lights off. And as you turn in no more than about 10 knots, nice and gently. It's funny how these IVAO MTLs always have your lights showing, don't they? It's quite annoying. fix that. See the buses?
Yeah.
Yeah, I might have to turn those off on my AFCAD. Sorry, folks. Yeah, I can see you turning on now. So once you're parked through that ground connections menu, set your parking brake, chock the aeroplane, enable ground power. Yep, there you are. Once you've got the ground power enabled, before you turn the engines off, make sure that you trip the electrical power over to the ground power on the overhead. Let me know when you've done that. Okay, so you can put the fuel control cut-off levers to cut off, and then it's turning off things that can kill people. So turn off your electronic hydraulic pumps, the inner two sets should go off, the fuel pumps can go off. The isolation valve can go off, the APU bleed valve is off, the packs can go off, the beacon can go off, the anti-collision light as it's called, and then you can turn the seatbelt signs off. And at that point, other than closing down IRSs and whatever, the flight is pretty much finished. Well, that was fun.
Indeed.
Any questions?
No, apart from the fact I parked a meter to the left of the centre line.
Oh well, there are no parking lines at Madrid, so I think we can probably let you off. And before, I'm sure you're going to get lots of people, hopefully you'll get lots of people asking questions and saying this and that. Remember, all we've shown you there is a set of procedures that are taken from the Boeing proprietary documents that you get with the NGX. They're quite hard to follow, there's no index to them, but if you're perverted like me and you like to read things like that, you will be amazed at how much information you will find. And all of those procedures that we've talked about today, I would say, are probably in those manuals somewhere. And I think, as I look forward, I think we're going to probably fly black in a day or two. There's a different departure profile out of Madrid, so we'll show you how to do that. We'll also show you how to set up the aircraft to be pushed back, and we'll do a pushback instead of a start on and self-manoeuvre. And then we'll land back at Palma.
Well, as Steve said, this is how it will go. If you enjoy this type of stuff, then let us know. If you want questions answering, again, let us know. We will do this based on how many people want to see it. So if no one wants to do it, then we'll just do it amongst ourselves and we won't show you it. But if you want to see it, then absolutely we'll keep chucking stuff out like this. It's not refined. It will get better over time. Obviously, as you know, you do things more frequently, you get better at them. So that's really all I have to say on that. Have you got anything to add?
Except for Matt's landings, which...
My landings, yeah, they will get inevitably better, but it's the procedures behind them.
How long have I known you now? 6, 7 years? And I can tell all of you watchers and listeners out there that you can always hear the overhead bins wobble when Matt lands, even living 6,000 miles away in Australia.
Yeah,
but hey, a good landing's one that you can walk away from, isn't it?
Yeah, and I've been walking away from them for 8 years, so it's fine.
So yeah, Matt's got it right, and you know, we can take this as far as people want to. If you want to have weak wing views and things like that, then I'm probably not the person to talk to, because I don't think I've ever looked at a wing view in Flight Sim. But if you want to do more of this, we can do it. We can do non-precision approaches. We can
anything
do non-precision
specific,
approaches.
stick it in the comments, and then we'll know what to do.
I'll rattle off a few pointers. A non-precision approach, we can do that in VNAV. We can do a non-precision approach in VS. We can do an RNAV approach. We can even do a visual approach. We're quite good at those, aren't we, Matt?
Oh, yes.
We can do, probably we can do flat one takeoffs and talk about those. We can do full power takeoffs in very bad weather. We can fly in rainy weather and do the anti-icing procedures. Pre-flight, takeoff, in-flight, and landing. And I guess we could probably even do emergencies later on if we really wanted to, although Matt seems to have quite a lot of those without actually making his aeroplane do anything. So we can do whatever you want. If you're not interested in it, as he said, this is what we do all the time because we're perverts, but if it doesn't float your boat, it doesn't float your boat. If it does, yeah, we can do some more of it. flight simming is a wonderful hobby. Some people like to do it like this. Some people just want to get in and fly and aren't interested. Hey, who are we to tell you what to do?
Pretty much.
But anyway.
So that concludes our first flight from Palma to Madrid. As always, you can catch me and probably Steve. I'll give him the links to Facebook and Twitter and YouTube, etc. And if you like this and you want to see more, as I said, make sure that you comment. And also, if you're new, don't forget to hit the subscribe button, of course. And until the next time, we will see you later.
Ta-ra.